Guys, today's build is the Alacrigade Renegade. One of the most versatile builds out there in that it can not only do Alacrity, but it can also make Might, and it can also greed for personal DPS if you have Might and Alacrity covered by somebody else. It's just a really good build, really fun to play, super solid. Doesn't carry quite as hard as Condi Quickness Firebrand, but it is a very powerful support build that scales well with the skill of your team. And I'm going to explain everything that goes into this build and just how awesome it is. So if this is the type of build that you enjoy, stick around, stay tuned, and you will see the Alacrigade Renegade in full power. Alright guys, let's talk gear for the Renegade. Gear is very easy to tell you, very hard for you to acquire. The gear is going to be full diviners in every slot with Runes of the Scholar, and Sword with Force and Impact. That's it. All diviners, Force and Scholar Runes, Force and Impact. If you want to play this build in Fractals as well, you could use this gear, but I believe the Fractal build does use some pieces of Berserker mixed in because you have a little bit higher boon duration in Fractals. You can check the Discretize website if you are the type that's going to be playing this in both game modes. Additionally, on swap, you can use a staff. I keep the staff on there for the emergency CC from Surge of the Mists, but actually in open world, I've never actually swapped to the staff at a open world event. I've done it in like solo roaming every now and then, but I've never done it at a world event. So if you want to skimp, you can go with Sword, or even make the staff like some cheap exotic Berserker item. But again, the gear is super easy to remember. The hard part is getting the gear. You either have to use a lot of raid currency, which most people don't want to blow, or you have to use do a lot of Thunderhead Keep meta and farm the hearts every day to get the branded masses. Neither of which are particularly fun, but hey, it's nice to have something to grind for, I guess. I don't know. It's up it's up to your interpretation on whether that interests you or not. So with that said, that's it for the gear. Pretty straightforward, and now we'll talk about traits. All right, guys, traits. This build, pretty straightforward. Devastation, Invocation, and Renegade. In Devastation, we go with Vicious Lacerations, Assassin's Presence for the nice AoE ferocity boost, and Swift Termination for our own personal DPS. In Invocation, we go with Rising Tide, Spirit Boon, and Charge Mist. Now, some people might say, oh, well, why not Roiling Mists? Why Charge Mist? Well, in Renegade, we have Brutal Momentum, and I find that at a lot of events, you don't really have to dodge. A lot of events are you pretty much just attacking, and you're not really dodging much. So for the most part, Brutal Momentum is good enough, and Charge Mist gives you such a nice energy boost that it lets you have a pretty good DPS increase if you can get away with it. If you find that you're at a particular event where you just can't keep up Brutal Momentum, sure, feel free to switch to Charging or Roiling Mists. That's perfectly fine. But Charge Mists, if you can keep it up, is going to be pretty nice for you. And then Renegade, we're going to go with Wrought Iron Will and All for One. But really, those traits don't matter. You can literally pick anything you want in the Adept and Major. What you come to Renegade for is the Grandmasters. And the Grandmaster we're going to go with 90% of the time is Righteous Rebel. Righteous Rebel makes our Orders from Above, which is our Alacrity spell, 10 man, and last 50% duration increase. What does this mean? This means that we can keep up 100% Alacrity uptime on 10 players when we run Righteous Rebel. Your experience may be different than mine, but I find in open world, Alacrity is harder to get than Quickness. There's many, many times where I'm at a meta event and I'm getting pretty close to 100% quickness uptime, but my Alacrity uptime is like 5%. Just because Chronos tend to run Time Warp, but they're not so good about spreading Alacrity, especially to 10 players. So in that case, that there's a niche in open world for someone to make Alacrity, and Righteous Rebel is the way you do it. Well, what do you do if you are in a situation where you have 10 guys in your squad and you notice that like 2 of them are chronos and they're boon chronos? You can guess that you're going to have pretty good Alacrity uptime. In the case where you do have to swap, you're going to want to swap to Vindication, which is going to make your Citadel Bombardment better. A lot, or I dare say most open world events, the boss you're fighting is large hitbox. And Citadel Bombardment becoming a lot better is really good for large hitboxes where it's already really good to use Citadel Bombardment. So if for whatever reason you don't need buffy badass Orders from Above, and you can get away with it to run Vindication, do it. Now that's probably 9% of the time you're going to run Vindication. 1% of the time you're going to run Lasting Legacy. Let's say you're in a squad where it's you have quickness and alacrity covered by chronos, but there's literally no one to make might. In that case, you would run Lasting Legacy, and it would make sure that your heroic command was able to help be the might stacker for the group. And you're a pretty damn good might stacker with all the boon duration that this build has. But might is easy to come by. What's hard to come by is alacrity, so that's why 90% of the time we run Righteous Rebel. All right, so the skills and the rotation is pretty complicated sounding. It's very easy in practice, guys, but it sounds complicated, and the way I'm going to explain it is going to make it sound complicated, but you'll see once you play it that it's actually not. Essentially, everything you do, all the choices you make, are determined by your cooldown on Orders from Above. If you switch to a legend, let's say right now we're on Shiro, and it's time to switch to Kala, and we switch to Kala. Depending on the cooldown of Orders from Above determines what other skills we do, because you always want to have energy saved for Orders from Above. So we switch to Kala. If the cooldown on Orders from Above is 6 seconds or less once we switch to Kala, again, I'll calm it down so it's very easy to understand. We swap to Kala, and the cooldown on Orders from Above is 4 seconds. That means we're going to have to use Orders from Above while we're on Kala, which means we can't dump our energy out on damage skills. So, if we switch to Kala, and we do have to use Orders from Above, all we're going to do is drop Soul Cleave Summit, and then wait for Orders from Above, and auto attack. And then once Orders from Above is ready to go, we use it. If we have any energy left, then our priorities are going to be, if we have 20 energy left, to drop an Ice Razor's Ire. If we don't, then we try to get in Precision Strike or a Shackling Wave. Now, let's say the other scenario. Let's say we swap to Kala and Orders from Above has 12 seconds of cooldown left. What we're going to do is drop Soul Cleave Summit, then Precision Strike, Shackling Wave, Death Strike, and then once we get down to about 20 energy, we use Ice Razor's Ire, and then we swap to Shiro. So you have basically 2 modes. You have, yes, I'm going to use Orders from Above in this legend mode, which is where you conserve your energy, and then you have the mode where you're not going to use Orders from Above, and you can kind of blow your energy on your weapon skills. In Shiro, you will go into Impossible Odds once you swap to Shiro. If you need to use Orders from Above, you just auto attack and wait for Orders from Above. Then you use Orders from Above, and whatever you have left can then go into Precision Strike, Shackling Wave, and Death Strike. If you go into Shiro and the cooldown is, say, 10 seconds on Orders from Above, meaning you're not going to have to use it, you go into Impossible Odds, and then you go 2, 4, 5, and then auto attack chain, then 2, auto attack chain, and then you're probably going to be time to swap to Kala. And yes, you do want to swap your legends on cooldown. So you're always swapping your legends as often as possible, just because you get your energy refilled while doing so. So yeah, each legend essentially has two modes. You have, again, the I'm going to use impossible odds on this legend, low power mode, or the no, I'm not going to use impossible odds until the next legend, and I can therefore blow my energy on weapon skills or more callous spirits. It sounds complicated. I don't want to scare anyone away from playing this build by how complicated that was to explain, because in practice it's very easy. In practice, what's going to happen is you're going to swap legends and you're going to look at your orders from above, and if you see a number above 6, you're going to be able to blow a lot of energy, and if you see a number below 6, you're going to conserve energy. And it's really that simple. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. The only other thing I would advise is to not interrupt your auto attack chain to use any of your other weapon skills. You always want to use the weapon skills after your third auto, because your third auto hits quite hard, and you don't want to interrupt it with a precision strike, shackling wave, or a death strike. As good as those skills are, the third auto is pretty nice, so try to do your best not to interrupt it. But that's really sort of a more advanced skill that I would say applies to people that raid in Fractal and are trying to squeeze out the last bit of DPS. For most open world people, you could probably get away with just using your energy efficiently rather than microing your autos a bit over the top. Anyway, guys, that is it for skills, and I will talk about a few things and wrap up the video. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is food. This build actually does have a food that is somewhat important, although there are budget choices. The DPS food you can use is the sweet and spicy butternut squash soup. Of course, most people do not want to use sweet and spicy butternut squash soup for open world. Completely agree with you. The best value food, if you don't want to use sweet and spicy butternut, is the avocado smoothie thing. I think it's the Sandswept Isles map. One of the heart vendors sells an 80 power, 60 ferocity food that is sort of the budget version of this, and that's what I would recommend for the budget version of this. If you're super budget, you can use the Orion steak frites thing where it's 100 power and 70 vitality. That works too. You just want to make sure that you're doing main stat power in your food, because the build doesn't really need any outside crit chance besides Fury to hit 100% crit chance. So with that said, feel free to overload on that. The next thing is holographic super cheese, which is annoying because it's expensive and it's only available from Super Adventure Box. This is like the god tier food for this build. It gives you a ton of power. Since this build has a lot of concentration, thanks to the Diviner gear, you get a ton of power from holographic super cheese. Additionally, you gain more concentration from your precision, which we also have a lot of with Diviner gear. Holographic super cheese gets you to the breakpoint for your orders from above to be 100% uptime. Without holographic super cheese, your uptime is like something like 96%. If you want that last 4% of Alacrity uptime, you need to use some sort of food that gives you boon duration. And holographic super cheese is the best because it gives you the boon duration you need while also giving you a crap ton of power. If you are on a budget and you don't want to spend, at the time of this video, a gold on your food, you can use peppermint oil, which will give you the concentration that you need, but it's not. It'll actually give you. It'll give you a little bit more concentration than you need, I believe. But it's not gonna give you the fat bonus power. I think most people in open world will live without the power to use peppermint oil, and they'll go by with that. But if you want to be Mr. Tryhard, best in slot, guy, you're going to go with sweet and spicy butternut squash soup and holographic super cheese. And I apologize in advance for making this video and popularizing holographic super cheese, because it might go up over a gold after this goes up. So sorry about that. But anyway, guys, that's the food for this build. So one last thing to talk about is just sort of the role that this build plays and what it's good for. This build is not the hardest carrying build out there. Yes, Alacrity is like a 15% damage boost overall, and it's 15% on 10 players, so it's really good. But it's kind of up to the players to take advantage of that damage boost. It's not like Might, where if you have some mouth-breathing knuckle dragger who all he does is auto-attack, and you give him 25 Might, he's going to do more damage. No matter how bad he is, as long as he's attacking, he's going to do a little bit more damage. With Alacrity, the person has to actually be using their skills in an intelligent way to make the most of it. So I find that this build doesn't single-handedly carry as hard as the Quickness Firebrand or the Banner Warrior or the or even the Might Ellie, but it's really fun to play. And if you have a group of good players or even halfway good players, it does pull its weight quite a bit. So if you like the build, this is a good one to run. I enjoy playing it. It's super fun. Sure, it's not as good. It's not going to carry bad people as much as the Firebrand will, but that's a pretty high bar anyway, because the Firebrand build carries super hard. So if that's what you're measuring builds against, you're in big trouble, because nothing's going to compare to that. But it does have great support tools, pretty good DPS, and it's fun to play. So I hope you guys do give it a chance. And thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.